So this is our corn planter, and this particular machine is 8 years old. It's had 8 seasons on it now, and we pull it with a 10-year-old tractor. And we feel that this machine here, about 5 foot in length from the row cleaner to the press wheel, is probably one of the most important tools we have on the farm. We don't do a lot of other trips other than, we spray and we plant and we might side dress, So we don't do a lot of different activities. So we do spend a lot of time, and we spend quite a bit of our money in this row unit here just making different improvements. And that's where we start with the row cleaner, where we want to move that residue off to the side. And that's probably one of the most important pieces, add-ons that I would recommend for a farmer to get. And this particular row cleaner is a precision clean sweep, which we can activate and change it, the height of it from the cab. And so we can change it on the go, which is really important. Every field situation might be a little bit different. And so having the ability to change the pitch of that row cleaner going through the field is pretty important. You want to get that even spread, and so that that residue is evenly spread across the field, that we don't have it in clumps. Well, now we're out there with 40-foot draper heads on these combines. Now we're a little bit behind again with the straw spreaders, and so we're trying to get that straw evenly spread in the fall, and so that's a challenge. And now that's why it makes this row cleaner, pretty important again. So we're in areas where we don't get that straw spread quite right, we feel that that's an important design. The next thing that we probably want to talk about is the disc opener. On this particular planter, ours are 15-inch, the double disc opener on this John Deere planter, or the 15-inch. I've got the heavy 3.5 millimeter blade on there. And we want to make sure that we've got our 2 to 2.5 inch where these blades come together, and so that it's really important to get those disc openers set right. This is really the only tillage tool that we have on the farm, and that's making that V-trench for that seed to fit into. And so we want to make sure that those coulters are touching with that 2 to the 2.5 inch where they come together. Now that changes by the thickness of the blade and by different planters. So definitely look at your operator's manual. It will vary by the planter. And so on this particular one, we try to get those disc openers set up, and through time they'll wear when they get down to about 14.5 to 14.5/8, where it's time to change these. So that's the disc opener is a pretty important part to pay attention to. Many years ago, the depth wheel here is the next one we talk about. Years ago, we started out with a different kind of a depth wheel. We started with the reduced inner diameter gauge wheel, depth wheel that goes on the side. This one that we've got on here now is the John Deere, where it has, as it gets closer to the disc opener, instead of being reduced inner diameter, it comes up. And so this is the standard one that they started with. We used to have these on years ago, and so as the disc opener would go through the field, it would, in a no-till situation, it's trying to push that soil over, and it would compact that sidewall. And so the idea of the reduced inner diameter tire, or this is one that the Case IH planter would have, we put these on so it would leave room for that soil to move over, and so we wouldn't have a sidewall that's compacted. As we change systems into a no-till cover crop, our soils become a lot more mellow again, and so we can maybe afford to put a little compaction so we get that V-trench in there. And so what I'm really saying is we use these reduced inner diameter gauge wheels for about 20-some years, and now we're seeing where we're wanting to switch back to a regular gauge wheel or depth control wheel. And so, the key point here is, we have to kind of look at your own fields and decide what it's going to take to get that perfect seed to soil contact. And we see in a lot of cases where this depth wheel does a better job. We have 2 sets where we can change these in and out, but the key thing is whatever it takes on your farm to get that seed to soil contact, we have to make adjustments, and this is just one example to it. Just moving on back, the next thing that we added on were the Keaton seed firmers. We added these on many years ago, and then in this case, what this does, this is the firming point that pushes that seed to the bottom of that V-trench and the bottom of the furrow. And so we want that seed to be at the bottom of the V-trench with the seed to soil contact, and that's what the Keaton seed firmer does. And we'd like to see about a pound of pressure on there. You can measure that with a fish scale. And the Keaton seed firmer over time it's a poly-made product, and it'll absorb moisture and it'll lose its strength. And so this is something that you're going to want to go through and check each season, and you may want to change these out and put new ones on. And so we feel that that's a pretty important item to have on. And we also run our starter fertilizer through there. We have a little bit of a 624-6 hop-up fertilizer, about 3 gallons to acre that we add on. And in this case now, I don't have any insecticide on this planter, and so I add insecticide to my starter fertilizer. And I think, like a bifenthrin or a capture to get the seed attacking insects. That's what I'm going after, is the wireworms, the grubs, those type of seed attacking insects is what we're going after. In this case, we're not going after the rootworm. We control that through our BT products in our corn, our BT traits. But I feel, as I mentioned, there's about 4 things, and one of them is treating the insects, and that's where we will add the insecticide, and so through the Keaton seed firmer. And so we've kind of talked about, we've got the row cleaner, the disc opener, we talked about the depth control wheel, the gauge wheel. The next item is the spike closing wheel, the Martin spike closing wheel. This would fracture that sidewall, and so that corn could root out, because one of the problems in no-till, if you're planting into wetter, cooler soils, you're going to find that you might have a compacted sidewall. Well, this would, the Martin closing spike wheel would take that out. This happens to be a 13-inch spike wheel. And this would be the same type of wheel that's put on the row cleaner, except they're inverted left to right. You want to make sure the beveled edges is on the inside with the point. The last thing leaving the ground is the point. And so there is a left and right to this, and you want to make sure you have that right. You don't want to make a rotary hoe out of this. You just basically want to just collapse that sidewall compaction that we have on. What we've seen over time is, as you add rye cover crop to your field, our soils start to get really mellow. We see our fields are almost like flower pot soils from years and years of just roots growing. And so we're starting to see the soil structure change, as I mentioned. And so we almost feel that maybe we don't have enough compaction in there. A lot of times we're trying to take that compaction out of that sidewall. Well, maybe we don't have enough in there, where we might go back and just add the regular the closing wheel or the press wheel, and we might put this back on. We're going to experiment with it this year. And I think it's all about just getting enough weight to get that seed to soil contact, because if you're planting into a rye cover crop, you have a lot of root mass, a lot of airspace. And so we've seen situations where maybe we didn't have quite the perfect stand. The seed wasn't fully germinated, and we suspect maybe we didn't get that packed in there. And I think we're going to go back and add the rubber closing wheel, which is standard of what a lot of farmers use. And in certain cases, if you're in drier areas, and even the cast closing wheel might be an option. But it's field by field, farm by farm, and every farm is different, and there's really no one right answer. And the one thing I didn't mention on the row cleaner is we don't want to till the soil with this at all. All we want to do is just move the residue, and some would even say you want to see this maybe turning at 75 to 80% of the speed you're going through the field, maybe just turning slower than what you're actually traveling through the field. We're moving the residue and not the soil, because we feel that we've got the perfect seed bed out there through the no-till cover crops. You can't make a better seed bed, and we don't want to go through and till that soil. If we think we need to add a little more weight to it, by putting a different press wheel on. Some farmers will opt to put one rubber press wheel on with a spike closing wheel and go halfway. So there's a lot of different variations that you can experiment with. The one thing you really want to have with the spike closing wheel is the drag chain here. There's a square drag chain that it will pull some soil over if there's any open gaps or any holes that you poke in there. That'll pull like a cup full of soil over and cover to make sure that furrow is smoothed off. And we found that that's worked really good. We mentioned that nitrogen is very important. Years ago, we used to have a fertilizer opener like in a 2x2 or a 2x3, 2 inches over, 2 inches down, where we would put our nitrogen on maybe over 3 inches. In our case, we're working with 32% UAN nitrogen, and we found that those row units were expensive, they were heavy, it was just another form of tillage, it required maintenance, and so we opted to take those off, and then so we just put like a Y splitter where we're actually dribbling the nitrogen on the surface, so we call that a 2x0, 2x0, and that's where we're dribbling our nitrogen above the row, and we're splitting it on both sides. In our case, we're getting on about 60 pounds of nitrogen, around roughly 15 to 16 gallon an acre. I have talked to farmers that have put up to 200 pounds of nitrogen on following this row. I think at 28%, up around 70 gallons an acre would be what they run through there. And so, you know, that's an option. And we find that this has worked really well over the years, and it's really simple. It's an inexpensive way to an add-on compared to a fertilizer opener, and a lot of farmers have gone this direction. Kansas State University and the University of Minnesota have looked at the different ways to apply nitrogen with the planter, and they see that this works just as well as if you're injecting it over, in a 2x3 situation. And so, to me, I think that's a pretty important setup to have on that planter.